So I wanted to follow up tonight on the last video that I had put out this week. And in that video, I had talked about that it's 11 years ago this week that the FBI had come to my office 2 days after Easter and informed me that I was being charged with securities fraud and two other felonies, wire fraud and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. They also informed me at the time that I was facing 9 years in prison. So when the agent said, right now it's 9 years, the first thing that I thought about was that these guys are just here and they're trying to scam me. Although I knew that I was involved with some serious criminal conduct with myself and my partners, I in no way thought that what we were doing would constitute 9 years in prison. So I thought that they were trying to scam me. And after speaking with them for some time about the crime and the possibilities and some of the scenarios that may or may not happen, I told him I'd like to speak with my attorney, and he said, why don't you call your attorney and have him call me later today. So when they left, I called my attorney, told him about the conversation that I had had. He later got in touch with the agent that afternoon and set up a meeting the next day at the U.S. Attorney's office in Boston with the agents and the assistant U.S. attorney that would be prosecuting the case. So he went over there, he had his meeting, he came back to his office and called me and said, I'd like you to come over and I need to see you right away. So I went over there and he said to me, after this meeting, they feel as though, they meaning the government, they feel as though they've got enough information or enough evidence to put you in prison for 9 years. Again, my thought was, why does everybody keep on talking about 9 years? What did I do that would put me in a position to go to prison for 9 years? He then started to explain to me something called the federal sentencing guidelines, which I'd never heard of before. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit about tonight, is the federal sentencing guidelines. Never heard of them before, nor would I have had any reason to hear about them. So he explained to me that the guidelines are put together. The prosecutor will put together a guideline range of what they would be recommending to the judge when I would finally get to sentencing, of a range of what they would be anticipating or asking for a prison sentence. And this is calculated a number of ways. It's calculated with the loss associated with a crime, in a white-collar crime. In a drug case, it might be calculated with the amount of drugs that are involved in the crime. It's calculated with the person's role in the crime. If he's a small-time player, very low end, he might not have a lot of exposure with the sentencing guidelines. In my case, I was one of the top people involved with the crime, so I was given a manager's role, which is an enhancement which will increase the sentencing guidelines. There's also, how was the crime committed? It could just be a basic crime, or someone could be using sophisticated means to commit that crime. In my case with my partner, we were using offshore brokerage firms with nominees to help us sell shares to evade the 5% rule and to break Rule 144. So in addition to the loss amount, in addition to the manager's role, we were also giving another enhancement for sophisticated means. And then in addition to that, you may or may not get an enhancement for a prior criminal record, which I did not have. But if you're someone that has a criminal record in the past, even something minor could enhance your federal sentencing guidelines. So on the guideline chart, a loss of anywhere between $3 and $7 million is going to give you sentencing guidelines between 78 and 97 months in prison. Between myself and my partner, we were given a loss number of $3.7 million, and the loss comes from the amount of shares that we sold a gain. So combined, $3.7 million on the conspiracy to commit securities fraud. So the number that was given to us, just to be clear, wasn't what we had sold in shares or made in a gain each. It was a combined number because of the conspiracy. So $3.7 million, along with some of the enhancements, such as the sophisticated means and the manager role, gave us sentencing guidelines of 78 to 97 months in prison. So we're looking at roughly 100 months in prison. So what's important is, if the FBI comes to you with a target letter, or they arrest you, or they tell you you're going to be charged or indicted, or if you are pleading guilty to an information, which is waiving your right to an indictment, any of these, what's going to happen is your attorney is going to sit down with the prosecutor, analyze the charges against you. They're going to come up with a sentencing guideline. And at that point, your attorney will come back to you and tell you what the guidelines are and what you have to work with. It's very important that your attorney look at those guidelines, question them, look at some of the charges, see if there's a possibility to get some of the charges dropped, see if there's a possibility to maybe get the loss amount or the gain down to a lower number that's associated with you, and see if there's a possibility to not put the tag on you of a manager or a leadership role. I say this because in my case, I had a starting point at sentencing of 78 to 97 months, which is just super high and, just really difficult to get a non-prison sentence with those types of guidelines. Ultimately, I did. I was sentenced to 1 year home confinement, but my case was not normal. So it's very difficult to do that. What you want to do is you want to get the lowest starting point on the guidelines possible. If you're going before a judge with guidelines of 78 to 97 months, it's really difficult to expect, home confinement or a low sentence. But if you're going into a sentencing with guidelines of, 18 to 24 months, 24 to 36 months, and you're doing some sentence and mitigation work, you're making restitution, you're going in with a proper sentence mitigation package. Perhaps you might even have a 5K1 letter for cooperation with the government, any of these. But if you're starting at a much lower number, it's a lot easier to get a low sentence, or in some cases, home confinement or probation. So that's what you want to do with your attorney. You want to take a look at the guidelines, you want to take a look at the charges, and you want to have your attorney do his best to negotiate with the prosecutor to help you maybe get some of these things taken off your charges so you can start at a much lower point. Lastly, in taking a look at some of these crimes, like a leadership role, or on a different spectrum, a gun charge, having some of these charges on your record, if you are going to end up going to prison and probation is not a possibility for you, having things like a leadership role or a gun charge, even if you're getting into some programs like RDAP, the Residential Drug and Alcohol Program in prison, which could decrease your sentence up to 1 year and give you as much as 1 year halfway house time. We'll talk about that later in another video. But in some cases, things like a leadership role in a crime or a gun charge may potentially eliminate you from having the opportunity to get additional time off of your sentence. So this is something that you also want to talk to your attorney about and consider. We can help you with this as well. So feel free, I have my information down below in the bio. If you have any questions about the federal sentencing guidelines or how you may approach this with your attorney, please feel free to contact me today. I'm happy to consult with you on this. And if any of this information was helpful tonight, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel and like this video. I would be very grateful if you could do that, and I wish you the best on your journey.